Well, Mr. Borrego, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Creighton and Senators. My name is Jorge Borrego, and I serve as the Education Policy Director at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and I am testifying in strong support of SB 2. In my role, my work often revolves around data and statistics. While fulfilling, I am often mindful that these numbers aren't just abstract figures, but they represent the lives of millions of Texas students and the hopes that their families have for their futures. Instead of just simply presenting statistics today, I want to bring them to life by sharing the story of Anthony and Wendy Contreras, hardworking parents living on San Antonio's west side. As any San Antonian will tell you, and I believe Senator Menendez will be in agreement, that the west side is steeped in cultural pride and tradition, but it is a community that struggles with educational challenges. Consider the high school to which the Contreras family was zoned to. Only 26% of students were on grade level, and just 9 were proficient in math. Wendy and Anthony refused to let these statistics define their child's futures. They sought out a private school, and their children flourished in an environment benefiting from both high-quality curriculum and a values-based instruction. But tragedy struck when Anthony died unexpectedly. No longer able to afford tuition on a single income, Wendy made an extraordinary sacrifice. To cover the tuition, she sold her family's home and put their children's future above all else, even at great personal cost. No parent should ever have to make that decision. This is why SB 2 matters. SB 2 makes tremendous progress from the work done and led by the Senate last session. Let us honor Wendy and Anthony and the sacrifices of thousands of parents here in Texas by passing SB 2. Thank you, Chairman Creighton and members of the Education Committee. I'll be glad to take any questions after.
Members, are there any questions this panel?
Yeah.
Yes, Senator.
Question for Mr. Borrego. There's been a question earlier about the average cost, I think, of a private education in Texas. I think your organization did a study on that and came up with the median cost of a private school in Texas. Can you tell us what that is?
Yes, the median cost of a private school in Texas is just a little bit over $9,000. So the ESA at a full $10,000 amount would cover the median cost of tuition.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Creighton?
I also had a question. TPPF is published on a number that's different than, let's say, Raise Your Hand Texas, on the number of dollars, the dollar amount itself that a public school student would average across the allotments, right? So there's a lot of comparisons to why is the ESA at a dollar amount that's above the basic allotment, which the basic allotment is the initial allotment, right? It's separate from K through 3, or it's separate from Comp Ed, it's separate from many other allotments that are available, correct? And so Raise Your Hand Texas, that usually a lot of teacher organizations quote, they say the average public school student receives around $11,000. TPPF, they're quoted at $16,000 plus.
That is correct, and that's using data from the TEA. The average statewide expenditure for per student is $16,792.
And then our bill, I'm carrying once again as we were in Senate Finance yesterday, and it's interesting when people tell me that's not the real number, because we literally were in Senate Finance yesterday, and this is all like triple and quadruple audited, but when we put $96 billion into public education, and there's 5.2 to 5.3 million students, when you divide that out, that's 18 plus. Let's just say that's a little high. But how do you arrive at your number?
Again, we're looking at PEMS data. So the most after the fact, after TEA releases their actual figures after they've been audited, we look at them and we break them down by the campus, and we are able to arrive at a per campus pupil amount, and then extrapolating that out to a state average.
And I understand there's some wealthy districts that don't get much more than the initial allotment, right? And then there's some other districts that receive a tremendous amount of dollars more, and those may be 8 miles down the street from each other. And there's incredible differences, as we've had 40 years of litigation on fairness within school finance formulas. And many of us, like myself, we don't like the impact of exactly what happened in the 80s with Ross Perot's effort for what led to Robin Hood and recapture. And we've actually reduced our reliance on recapture over the past 3 sessions by over 30%. And we're continuing to work on that. But this has been decades of a budget culture. And there are many districts that would rather keep more money of their tax money at home. There are many districts that need more money sent to them from other parts of the state. But when we talk about what we fund in public education, those numbers are accurate. And I wanted to know if you could help me delineate between why Raise Your Hand publishes 11, why TPPF publishes north of 16, and why many would still look at this bill and say the true comparison is the basic allotment compared to 10 grand.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, to delineate between the two, so groups like Raise Your Hand Texas, they will prioritize only looking at the base, the smallest amount without any of the extra allotments, while we take into account the whole totality of what the public education system and what the taxpayers fund on a per student basis. I do want to also add some further clarification. That $16,792 amount is not including any recapture amount. So that is just looking at before that. So those districts that do pay a little bit more in recapture, if you include that, it will go up. So that's just exactly what stays within the bounds of the school district.
Got it. And our number for the ESA is not tied to a certain percentage of the M&O. It's not tied to school finance. It's more or less giving families that need help the most a shot at an average tuition across the state for a private school experience, right? And so, but there are many comparisons, and as we put $39 billion new dollars into public schools over the past 10 years, and we have an unprecedented lift on public school money of nearly $5 billion just this budget cycle, and that could continue to grow. The trend that I'm seeing is we normally put new money into public schools, $1.7 to $2.3.5 billion a biennial budget. This number's 5. So we're at about a 2x factor plus inflation on the number that we have now, and I just think it's historic. And so I don't quite understand why that's not being celebrated, but it tells me that there's frustration with the formulas, which we all share. So I just appreciate your perspective, and anything you could get to our office on that, I would love to see the comparisons.
Yes, sir. I'd love to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Bittencourt. And then
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Menendez to follow.
Quickly, your 9,000 estimate on the average private school cost, that is factored in scholarships, I would assume, to that number?
I believe that is before scholarships.
That's before scholarships.
Correct.
So the actual impact number would be less.
Correct.
Do you have any estimate yet, or can you get one?
I could get that to you.
And then to follow up on Senator Creighton, I assume the numbers you're dealing with from TEA are post the landmark SB2 property tax relief, because that dramatically reduced recapture around the state. You know, HISD, for example, was paying over $170 million in recapture, and they're now paying $0.
So the numbers we look at, because they do take time to be audited by a TEA, the most recent figures we have is for 2023, that school year.
So that school year. So you don't have the recaptures, the big reduction from SB2 yet into because you're not looking at 23-24 yet, right?
That will be published in around March.
Around March. So we should have that information before the session's out.